Welcome to this Ask Me Anything session with Chad Beier on the Agile Online Summit. Good to see we've got a couple people already jumping on board. Chad, if you want to just do a quick intro about yourself, and then we can kind of jump in. I'm sure people have lots of good questions, and more will be joining us.
Sure. Quick intro. So right now I run my own company, whiteboardconsulting.org, in Wisconsin. And yeah, I do coaching, training, advising. I'm a professional Scrum trainer with scrum.org, so I teach a variety of curriculum there. Yeah, that's a quick intro about me, and then I guess maybe depending on what the questions come up, I'll give a bit more background throughout the session.
Sure. Great to have you with us, Chad. Now I know you know Jonathan, who's with us. We've got Bojan,
yes.
We've got Stefan. So if you guys want to, I'll just kind of be quiet and enjoy the conversation.
Awesome. What questions do we have, if any?
I'm curious about, you've been talking, so Chad and I know each other from the Madison kind of Agile community. I'm curious to hear more about systems thinking and how it applies. Like, a lot of Agile is really kind of prescriptive in terms of, like, do these processes, follow these scripts. What's up with your perspective on systems thinking? What is that anyway?
Cool. Yeah, so systems thinking, I'm by no means an expert when it comes to systems thinking, but I'm extremely passionate about me learning more about systems thinking and others learning more about systems thinking. So my first introduction to it was when I read The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And that book kind of opened my eyes to it. And then I really was heavily influenced by systems thinking and systems modeling and causal loop diagrams when I attended a course with Craig Larman. I think it was back in 2015 or 2016. I can't remember. I think it was 2015. And that just kind of like blew my mind as far as giving me a new vocabulary to use around things that I think most of us feel intuitively, but we just don't, sometimes we can't find the right words. So for me, systems thinking is really not taking an approach when it comes to organizational change, because I spend a lot of time with organizational agility advice. So that's kind of where I'm spending all the time around change. And there are people in the change community who think that managing change and organizational change is somewhat of a changing hearts and minds. And if you take a systems thinking approach, you might not focus so much on changing people's attitudes and behaviors, but looking at the environment that surrounds them and look at tweaking and changing incentive structures, team structures, org structures, processes that might be bureaucratic or not bureaucratic. All those things are part of the system, the system of human system dynamics that is going on inside of an organization. And if you look at those environmental variables and change those, you will see the behavior changes follow, right? And so it's taking a completely different approach to change. And to go back to the real influential piece of what I took from Craig Larman's course, Craig has, he had 4 laws at the time. Now he has 5 laws, but he has 5 laws of organizational, Larman's laws of organizational behavior, I believe. And I'm butchering it. I don't think it's organizational behavior, but if you look up Larman's laws, you will find these. Just Google Larman's laws. And he's still alive. It's not like he's, he always jokes like you have to be a certain age before you can come up with your own laws. And he also jokes that they're not really laws. They're just observations that he's seen over decades of consulting. So anyway, the 5th now law, it used to be the 4th law, but the 5th law is, to be brief, culture follows structure. And once I heard that phrase, it's one of those things that when you discover it, you can't unsee it. And I can't unsee that phrase from my brain. Like I can't get it out of my brain. So everywhere now I walk around the world, whether it's, you know, work related or not, I see culture follows structure. And what that means is basically people's behaviors are heavily influenced, maybe not solely, but heavily influenced by the environment and surrounding structures. So anyway, that's maybe a long-winded intro into systems thinking, and I didn't really give any details. If we want to take a little bit further, we could expand, and I could talk through how I use systems thinking in the work I do. But I'll shut up and see if there's any follow-up questions after that.
I have something. So about the Larman's law you mentioned.
Yeah.
One of the laws was that the organizations are kind of protecting the level of managers, first level, second, something like that. It was like they're structures in a way that the power structures are there to stay. What if those power structures are against agile? How do you do that?
Okay, so
like, I'm talking about not you pass through the point where you try to understand what are their problems, trying to show them that agile will work for them, and eventually there is some of this high management who is somebody who is just hard stone. It doesn't break, it doesn't soften, even whatever you tried. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Any idea? Any suggestion?
Yeah. So very great question. So Larman's first law, I like how we're flipping this into a discussion about Larman's laws of organizational behavior, but that's my happy place. So organizations are, I'll read it out loud. Organizations are implicitly optimized to avoid changing the status quo middle and first level manager and specialist positions and power structures. So what we mean by that is implicitly optimized, and the way I'm going to interpret this is because of the hierarchy that exists in most of the organizations we are familiar with, those manager and specialist positions are incentivized to do certain things, right? How we structure departments across an organization and then incentivize one department to work and deliver results, and then another department. Instead of optimizing the whole, we're optimizing the individual parts. This is another key concept in systems thinking. And so when we individually optimize, when we optimize the individual parts, that's what we would call a local optimization. And a local optimization isn't usually good for the greater good of the organization and what we're trying to do. But again, if you take a stance of systems thinking, there's no blame here. It's not that managers are evil. It's not that specialist positions are evil. It's that the way the structure of the organization that we're playing in is they're not victims, but they're heavily influenced by that environment that's pushing on them. And so the first law is really just highlighting that and talking about it so that we can maybe recognize that and then do something about it. And this is where, again, I prefer to take a systems thinking approach, because if we take the opposite approach of changing hearts and minds, then it becomes about, well, if we can get our managers' mindsets changed, then all will be well, right? Let's just change the managers' mindsets, teach them modern management skills. And I'm not saying those are bad things. Those could be beneficial. But the weight of that law, right, the weight of that influence of the structure surrounding them is going to probably win out over the wanting to change behaviors attitude. And so then we just run into those power structures and struggles and scratch our heads why change isn't working, why things aren't changing. So so I didn't really give a great answer to like how we solve that, but a lot of it would come down to recognizing this and then having a very assertive, not a tough love, but an assertive, open conversation with the people involved in those middle management layers and bringing them around to understanding systems thinking. I think that is the best approach we can take, because if you try to change someone else, that usually doesn't work very well, right? People don't like to be told to change. But if you can not convince someone, but if you can help them discover on their own the value in changing, your job is done, because you're not pushing it on them. You're helping them discover something, and then they can decide on their own to change. And this is why when people say to get buy-in for an organizational change, we need to go up a level, right? We need to get that buy-in at the leadership level. I agree, but it's sort of everywhere. You need buy-in from leadership, but it's really helping leadership, middle management, and everyone else in the organization who does the work discover it on their own. And this is why, I mean, and sorry, I might get off on a rant because that happens from time to time.
Not you, Chad.
Yeah, not me. I'm pretty passionate about educational conversations too. And again, no expert in the education community. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but you know, I have kids, and so I think about the educational system quite a bit. And I think there's a huge gap in our education system. No blame here, but an opportunity to fill a gap around teaching, maybe not kindergartners, I've said that out loud before, but somewhere along that path of education, instead of beating creativity out of kids and having them conform to a job of our corporate culture that exists mostly.
And wear a tie.
And that's a different story. But it's what would the world look like if we started educating children on systems thinking concepts? So when they're in high school, college age, they're looking at the world differently because they've been taught how to think about optimizing the whole, not the individual parts. Mm-hmm. And so when they get into organizations, they can say, this is odd that there's departments structured this way and different incentive structures, right? And if we can get them to kind of take the reins from how our organizations were structured before, I just wonder what that would look like.
Can I?
Because again, yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask a question here because I don't want to take a step back and understand. This is just from my viewpoint. I don't know. I haven't done a lot with Craig Larman, but I'm just hearing you talk about systems thinking, and I think, you know, the goal by Goldratt, and just comparing. It sounds like there's some similarities there, but is it? Maybe I'm assuming that, and maybe you can share the differences there.
Sure. So yeah, you're talking about the goal, the book, The Goal by Goldratt, written, I don't know, man,
80s,
90s,
maybe 70s,
80s, 90s. Yeah. It's a business school book. So I think that's when I first encountered it. Yeah. So the goal is really highlighting the theory of constraints, mm-hmm. and sort of the, I would equate it to looking at the whole and zooming out. Because theory of constraints is really zooming out, like from a factory floor optimization standpoint. Yeah. And looking at a pull system and figuring out, instead of reacting to high priority customer requests and always, thrashing as an organization, the book talks about how it's about almost like smoothing variability and flow, similar to Kanban being a pull system, mm-hmm. and looking for those bottlenecks in the organization, exploiting those bottlenecks and doing something. Because another key concept in that book is, an hour lost at the bottleneck is an hour lost in the entire factory, the entire system. And again, that's why I agree. I think systems thinking and the theory of constraints are very aligned. Slightly different in that maybe systems thinking is a bit broader. Okay. And the theory of constraints maybe could fall within that. Okay.
That's why I was wondering. I was just trying to understand.
Yeah, I think the theory of constraints is a bit more detailed on really focusing on finding bottlenecks and reducing or removing them, and then going mm-hmm. on to your next bottleneck, because there's always a bottleneck in the system. But the theory of constraints sometimes doesn't, if you try to apply the theory of constraints to an organizational structure and hierarchy and how to change the structure to unlock more organizational agility, that's where it might fall apart, and that's why systems thinking is a bit broader.
Helpful. Okay, good.